Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a very special guest, and if you're wondering where LaShawn is, this conversation is the one that she was that interested in or that knowledgeable about to really have a conversation about it. So you're stuck with me and Ace today. It's the Bro Show. But anyway, Ace, I'd like you to quickly introduce yourself for anyone here who doesn't know who you are.
Hello, everyone. I am Ace from the YouTube channel GM Ace. I talk about Ecuador and sometimes other things from time to time. And yeah, we've got quite the interesting topic to talk about today, don't we, Steve?
Absolutely, absolutely. As a military veteran myself, it's a very interesting subject to me for many reasons. I'm kind of conflicted on this. So today's subject is the plan for the Ecuadorian government to basically bring back the U.S. military. I know they're working on a project in Manta right now to facilitate that. Now, me not having, a long history with Ecuador, I can't say, what it was like or how if it was better or worse when the American military was here. But that's why I wanted to bring Ace in here to kind of shed some light on it. Basically, if you could, Ace, if you, as much as you know, what was different about the country? And I know it's not just the military that was different, but like, what was different about the country when the U.S. military was here? And then we'll get into like kind of our opinions about what's going on.
Okay, this is actually pretty interesting because, in the sense of the information, how it differs depending on. And I think everything is like this. The realistic point of view of a person living through the situation, living through seeing this happen, and the point of view of what you could call experts. And when you talk to people who might be who might have a little more knowledge on this situation, because I actually decided to do, I guess you could say, an in-depth, hardcore investigation of the military base, the one that was already here before. And what I found differs very much from what you hear from people nowadays. So from what you hear, at least from the perspective of everyone who lives here, from everyone who I've had the chance to talk to, the experience that you could say that I had, although I didn't really have the chance to really see how the situation was with the military base.
Mhm.
But from what everything that everyone says was life with the military base, at least the common conception is that it was good. It was controlling the drug because there was a lot more, I guess you could say, supervision whenever there was some kind of a drug that not drugs, but like a ship was passing by. They actually scrutinized it a little bit more. The perception of people is the idea that having an external power to supervise these things is going to be better, in the sense that there's someone who's not so, how do you say this, who's not so susceptible to being bribed, because
True.
the typical conception of Ecuadorians themselves, people who live here, even sometimes I feel that that's the reality. I live through it. Is that if you want to get something done, like if you want something to get done, you got some money, you pay it to the right people, you have a contact, you talk to that right person, and you can get things moving.
Hmm.
So the idea of having an external power like the United States military being the ones who supervise the passage of these ships makes everyone, the conception of people, normal ordinary citizens, and that's important because that's the difference here. Normal everyday citizens, it makes it feel like it's a lot more secure and there's less of a chance of drugs actually passing through. And if you look at the time when the base was there, at least everything that everyone says, there was less of a narco state at that time. It was less
Hmm.
of a drug trafficking state. Like, of course, there are ways that people smuggle things in that don't necessarily have to be through a ship, or maybe they find a clever way to do it. But the perception that everyone had was that things were less trafficked during that time because there was more strict control. There was a more strict control over these things passing by, over drugs passing by.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I've heard. Obviously, I wasn't around here back then, but that's what I've heard. And like you said, it's not impossible for, smart traffickers to still get around any of those kind of safeguards. It just makes it more difficult. And typically with any kind of narco trafficking or human trafficking or whatever. You want to go towards the path of least resistance, like electricity. And if you make it more difficult, then they usually shift the operations to where it's easier. At the moment, it is easier to go from Ecuador to Europe or to United States. Now, getting into the whole, I personally, I'm conflicted because you got a new election coming up in what 2 weeks. Depending on, I guess depending on who's the president, a lot of things could change in the country. And for me and LaShawn personally, we feel like whatever changes happen, whoever's elected, we're we're not the target audience. You know what I'm saying? Whatever's better for Ecuador, then I'm fine with it. Even if it's less favorable for me personally. If they decide to, go away from the dollar, okay, I don't put all my eggs in one basket anyway. That being said, I don't know where I lie on this decision because I don't, personally, I don't really get down with the administration of the United States. Will this deal put Ecuador under the boot of the United States? Like they will be able to exert some control over the country. To me, that's just like it's like another form of colonization. I don't really get down with it. However, what's the difference in the United States and like if China decided to put a base in Malta? You know what I'm saying? Like the country needs help, and where are you going to get it from? If you're going to get it, then you might as well get it from the most powerful, intimidating military on the planet. At the same time, it puts you kind of just in cahoots with that government, which may be up to some things that you don't agree with. So that's where I'm on the fence. Like this could potentially help, or my strategic side from working at the profession I did for so long is that well, if you limit criminal organizations or criminals or whatever, they find ways to make things difficult for you. So let's say that that base gets up and running, the American military is here. What if they say, okay, well, if you're going to have military personnel around, we'll start kidnapping American citizens around the country, like whatever, something crazy, right? Yeah, it's going to end up bringing more heat on them, but it's also going to bring more attention to the whole situation. It's going to put people, it might put people further on either side of we want the military or we don't. Because what if it starts affecting, they're kidnapping Americans, well, then that starts affecting the expat dollars that are spent in a lot of Ecuadorian businesses. People don't want to come here. It affects tourism. Like they can find ways to make it difficult, which would then encourage the Americans to be here in an even harsher presence, kind of like Colombia. And I don't know, it might be one of those things that backfires for someone like me, but benefits the country as a whole, according to the Ecuadorian citizens. And that's why I'm on the fence on. I'm not really sure what to think about this.
If we look back, and this is why I tried to make a heavy emphasis on the difference between a normal everyday Ecuadorian and the things that I found online. Most of the arguments against having a military base here had to do with the sovereignty of the country. Because, like you said, like if you have a military base here, first of all, this was something that when I started reading it, like I was more for having a military base because of the idea of more control, having maybe less drugs come in, and maybe a little bit of the crime might decrease. Like the idea, the notion, everything, like when you paint it like that, it sounds really good to someone who just normal everyday citizen who just listens to that and like, oh, amazing. But when I read through the analysis of everything that they were saying, it makes sense why the United States would want to have a military base here in the first place. Like you said, they have a little bit more control in the country. And with the current government that exists in the States, I'm not going to say whether I like it or not, but we know that with the current government, owing them something kind of puts you in a very precarious situation. If Ecuador accepts having the military base, which, well, it pretty much already has, it's like allowing the states to maybe in the future ask for a favor in return, like maybe being able to, oh, we want this resource at a cheaper price, or oh, hey, we want to set up other things in the country that maybe right now they wouldn't be allowed to. So it's like it's giving permission, and it is encroaching on the sovereignty of the country. When I started reading it, it made more sense why the states would help. Yes, I do think that there is the intention to minimize crime, to minimize drug trafficking, because if the drugs are trafficked, they pass through Ecuador to reach the states. So it's beneficial to them in that sense. But in the sense that the the country, Ecuador, has a lot of resources and a lot of potential that Ecuador itself doesn't really take advantage of all the time. For the states, that's something that they might be able to tap into a little bit more, and if they have a hand in the country, it might help them do more things that are beneficial to them. It's also an interesting argument because I remember while I was reading through all of this, there was also a part where, because this happened, like the removal of the base happened through in Rafael Correa's government. Like he was like, no, we're not going to sign the treaty, and he even, according to what I read, he even stated that they couldn't allow future construction of bases in Ecuador. So move forward into Lenin Moreno's time, and they asked him, like, would you be down for, like, I say it like that, but yeah, would you like for the states to build a new base? And as a joke, he actually said, I would be delighted. And it would also be great if the states would let us put a military base in Miami. And then he said that that's a joke because we respect, every country's sovereignty, but no, we're not looking into the idea of having a base here because it goes against, like you said, the sovereignty of the country. So it goes to show that at least in like when I started looking at it that way, like wouldn't it be fair, like as a normal citizen looking at it this way, wouldn't it be fair, like if the states is building something over here, yes, to help us, why not us do something in the states to help them, and even to help ourselves too? Because part of the argument, not the argument, but the joke that he said was the reason we would construct a base over there is to make sure that the rights of Ecuadorians who go to the states or who are living there aren't, trampled upon. Like their rights are being respected and everything as well. But no, it's reciprocal, and that lack of reciprocity is what makes it more apparent that having the base over here is just a benefit that the states wants to have in order to have their hand in the cookie jar, as you would say, of Ecuador. So there's a lot of benefits that we get, and if you don't want to overthink it, like you just say, okay, well, I mean, we can't ask for much because they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting over here by helping us out like that. But if you deep dive into it, it does seem a little bit excessive, the amount of rights that the states had. And I'll read some of them to you because I actually looked at it. I looked through it, and I'll send you this so maybe you can put it in the description if someone wants to read it, or you can read through it yourself. It's like this whole article that analyzes the points of view of people like experts, and it talks about the whole transition of not having it to having it. It talks about a few things that I thought were interesting, and I got the majority of my information from there. So the things that were exempted, it exempted foreign civilian and military personnel from permits, tariffs, taxes, and other legal obligations. It also allowed free entry and exit to Ecuadorian territory with only the presentation of U.S. identification. They were also exempted from import, export, direct, and indirect tax operations, which Ecuador normally imposes on products, materials, supplies, provisions, and equipment that is owned by them. So there were a lot of benefits to the people. And from what I read, it didn't really specify that it was only for military personnel. So I'm not sure if it also counted for anyone who was like family of the military or just anyone who was coming to Ecuador. Like it didn't specify it there. But from what I understood, at least, and being logical about it, it was to the military personnel and maybe people related to those military personnel. But it's still a lot of benefits. There's a lot of benefits that were given to the people who were coming here, yet they were exempt from any of the negative repercussions, because in addition to what I read were their benefits, there were also times where it's assumed, I can't confirm if that is the case or not, but it's assumed that there were casualties. They sunk ships that maybe didn't have the correct identification. In one case, I was reading an article talking where there was a person who lost his son because the U.S. military sunk the ship of his son, and he was having a hard time getting by, and no one responded to that. Like, it was like basically this happened, but there was no resolution. Like, what about a compensation? What about something that no, nothing. It was like that's it. So there's no repercussions for the actions that were being taken, which made it make sense why the base wouldn't why the military wouldn't be re-allowed to continue. But in that same way, there's also once again going into what people think about the reinstallation or well the initial removal of the base and why there's more of a push to reinstall it. It all comes back into our favorite government time, the one thing that Ecuadorians can never forget, Correísmo, at the time of Rafael Correa, going into the idea that the reason why he didn't renew it wasn't so much all the things that were said, the sovereignty, the abuse of power by the states. There's a lot of darker things that I read through there, even supposedly prostitution, raping of women, a lot of really bad things. But the thing that they don't mention, of course, because it's something that I kind of felt like this article was a little bit more on the side of Correísmo, is that the president might have Korea might have removed the military base and not wanted to keep it going because they wanted to leave the passage open to the mafia, the cartels, in order for them to come in. That's a story you hear all the time whenever you talk about the military base. The fact that, it protected us from the drugs, and the fact that it was removed is because they wanted to convert Ecuador into a kind of narco-state in order to have this kind of peaceful treaty with the mafia, the narcos, and everything. Like, that was the benefit that supposedly we got, that the president got from allowing this to happen. So, in theory, we all got that benefit of improved safety somewhat.
Yeah.
Through these deals. That's the conversation that you always hear. That's the thoughts that everyone has. Now, whether or not at this point now I agree with it being installed, now because of everything I read through, it does shift my perception a little bit more of if it does happen, there should be a lot more regulation in place for it. Like, it's okay. Like, I wouldn't mind having the base if it's only like, making sure that, drug trafficking and stuff, gets regulated. Well, not regulated, but like, stopped. But if they have the same benefits that they had the previous time without any of the repercussions, it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem completely right. As an Ecuadorian, I would feel like, no, that's not fair. That's not like, it's not a fair deal. Like, if it's going to be like that, like, then maybe like give Ecuadorians a little bit of benefits as well when going to the States. I don't know. Some kind of like give and take
There should be
situation,
some exchange. The population of Ecuador is a fraction of the United States. So whether it's like making it easier for Ecuadorian citizens, like you said, to travel to the United States, the country itself, and that's not, and you know what, that would only benefit a few Ecuadorians, honestly, because it's still expensive. But some benefit to Ecuador itself because you think about what, and I'm not trying to like harp on China or whatever, but you think about the stuff they did in Africa, the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Yeah, those deals really mainly benefited China, but the immediate benefit was felt in those African countries where infrastructure was a problem. And, yeah, they were kind of, under the boot of China, monetarily. And China honestly forgave a lot of those like loans recently, but it gave those countries infrastructure that they couldn't otherwise afford to build. And I think here in Ecuador, if the United States government is going to put some kind of installation in that really only benefits that mainly benefits the United States, there should be some other benefit to Ecuador other than the potential for reduction in crime. And one thing I know is that like when you take away gang territories, like they just fight over it, and it just increases. It might an immediate increase crime because let's say those major traffickers have to move operations to either other parts of Ecuador or Colombia or Peru or something like that. Well, they don't exactly have like compensation plans for their employees. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not moving them to another country to work necessarily. So those guys who maybe didn't want to work or couldn't work and had like a criminal lifestyle here, well, they're still going to be here if that organization leaves. And, what do you do with them? Because maybe they start robbing people more often. Maybe they start breaking into more houses. Maybe those, the things that Ecuadorians already hate increases, even though the drug trafficking itself may have been reduced. You got to do something for the country that you're introducing this new problem to, like helping them with jobs, industry, some kind of industry or something that builds a lot of jobs, education. Like education is a big thing, like for me. The poor communities, giving them the basic essentials, running water and, plumbing and, making their lives better, helping them with education, making it easier for kids to go to school here in Ecuador. Like one thing I can say about the United States, it has its problems, but like going to school is easy. You know what I'm saying? Like it's free. If you go to public school, it's free. You catch a bus, like all that's taken care of. Lunch, it's not necessarily the same here. Where if you're on the poorer side, kids may not be able to go to school or not regularly. It's not like in the U.S. So like it's something in the U.S. that we take for granted that a lot of countries don't have that advantage. And I just feel like if the U.S. military and the United States government is going to kind of embed themselves here again, they need to like improve the country as a whole, not just say, oh, well, we're helping you stop drug trafficking. Okay, but that's not the only problem in the country. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I think that, like, when I say I'm on the fence about it, it's like, what is this deal really? You know, is it just on the surface, like, hey, I want you to know that I got the military back here, the American military back here, and we're going to stop trafficking. Oh, yeah, I just made this deal right before I might get elected. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what is this deal really? And that's like I said, that's where I'm on the fence on. I do think that it could benefit the country greatly. I hope it does, honestly. I'm not wishing that it fails. I hope it does reduce the traffic. I hope it does reduce the crime. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It seems a little funny, on the surface.
Of course. Just going back a little bit into the things that you mentioned with the situation of the after effects, the repercussions of trying to combat crime, it is already being felt here in the country. I'm pretty sure you've already heard in many cases the extortions, the kidnappings.
Yeah.
There has been an uptick in that, at least from the perspective of what you can hear on a normal everyday level. I've heard a little bit more about these things happening, not just, and that was actually something that I talked about with Lewis in the podcast episode we made recently, where he even said, like before, the people you would target that would be targeted as a target of interest for kidnapping would be someone with money because they have a way to pay it. But now with such high a fight of against crime, there's a little bit more of I guess you could say protection on the street. Now it's like, oh, we can't specifically target the people who earn more, who have more money. Let's just target everyone. Like if we kidnap this one person, even if we can't ask for the 100,000, we would ask for the rich person. We can still ask for 5,000, and they can scrounge up $5,000 to get back this person. And there are cases like that I've been hearing. Even got an email the other day that I might talk about soon of an American, someone who actually got kidnapped. And I'm not saying that's like a common thing to happen because it really isn't. But maybe during this time and during this fight, it could happen. So look, and this is before the installation of the military base, the state's military base. The state's military base gets installed, and there could be even more of a pushback. Like there could be the opposite, where we could get things that get better. And going into what you said about education, it actually, the only thing that I have to say about that is that that's one of the things that I really respect about certain organizations that I've seen here. In the case of American organizations, maybe, I don't know if it's American, but I do remember Don Shader. He had mentioned that there's this donation that you can do to like get books to kids in the city of Manta. And something that I personally witnessed myself was there's this program over here. I don't remember the name, but it's like you can kind of pay for like this, like a scholarship program, I guess you could say, where someone from the States can, a sponsorship program. They can sponsor a kid over here, and then after, let's say, like a year or at certain times during the year, the person can come down and they can actually see what the kid's been doing, see what education they've been getting, see how this has changed their lives. So there are programs like that help, but that specific program, I don't think it's American created. Like it's not something that the States created, but it's something that over here, they ask for the help from people from outside of the country to help with that. I got to experience it because I went along as a translator, but it's something that I think is really cool, really interesting, something that I hope that that like if the states has a bigger hand in the country, that maybe they also like implement programs that do something similar, like hey, maybe adopt a child that or sponsor a child to help them out with their education, give scholarships for them to study in the states, things that make it easier for kids here to get an education. And you know, as we always say, or as is always said, part of the reason that people turn to crime is because they don't have that education. So if given the opportunity to have that education, maybe there's less of a chance for them to have to turn to crime.
Yeah, exactly. I really think that like like I said, my initial reaction to hearing about the base was mixed. I kind of lean on the side of it, being there in Manta, and perhaps maybe they need another one somewhere, further down the coast. I don't know how it would work to have one closer to Guayaquil. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think
Guayaquil really
that,
needs help.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's really no other way to say it, honestly. Like I said, I would lean towards it being, approved and embraced by the country. Just like I said, I'm cautious. I'm cautious because I don't necessarily trust the administration, the United States administration, to do what's right for the country rather than only do what's right for the United States. Of course, if you're a country and you've got a powerful military and you're going to implant yourself in another country, yeah, you're going to try to get the most benefits. It might be, it could be a 70-30 deal their way. This might be a 90-10 deal the United States way. I don't know. I don't know. And I really feel like, I don't know what the, rules of engagement, what the new rules of engagement will be for the military here, what their um, patrol area will be, because I'm not sure if it's going to be like the Navy or the Coast Guard or both. Is it strictly, will this just be like an off point from, Ecuador for them to help patrol Colombia and all the way down to Peru? Who knows? But, until we get further details, and honestly, probably until the election, we probably won't get really much more detail about this because I don't know, is Luisa even down with this idea?
If she follows the same line of thought as Rafael Correa, which I think we've more than proven that she does,
Yeah.
probably. I wouldn't say it's on a list of priorities. I don't know if what Novoa is doing is making it so that it has to happen, because the way that the previous base worked was that there was a contract in place. Like they had to stay for a certain amount of time. So I'm guessing if Novoa is allowing the base to be installed now, there's also going to be a set amount of time for them to stay. And then if suppose it's a year and Luisa doesn't want to renew it, then it's a year and it's gone. I don't personally see Luisa keeping the base because, like I said, her thought process aligns with Correa. Unless they want to be smart about it, and I like to think that it's easy in my mind, but it's probably more complicated on their end. But like they could play along with it, be like, no, yeah, we want the safety of the population, so we'll keep the base, making it look like no, there was never an intention previously to remove the base to allow cartels into the country. While in theory, could just be a strategy that they use to like make it seem that there was never that strategy. Like I make it sound easy in my mind, but maybe it's more complicated for them. They can't allow that because it goes against the thought process of Korea, so you have to remove it as soon as you can. Maybe that's just a theory. Maybe that was
Yeah.
never really the thing that was going to happen. Like Korea might have just removed it because, like I said, in part of what I read, there were a lot of complaints from people from in general, a lot of lawsuits that were put against the military base. There was even one, and that's the one that I find pretty funny, in the sense that they called it like when they tried to sue having the base in Ecuador, and in suing it, it basically went against the government. Let me see, I had it somewhere around here. On the other hand, okay, so it was an opportunity for the court to regain power, but instead, since the court ruled against it, it made it so that it against that the Constitution, so that it didn't grant the court the competence to hear and resolve claims of unconstitutionality of international treaties or conventions.
Mhm.
Basically, the power that they were trying to gain, they literally lost it and lost even more of it. So at the moment of like of rejecting the lawsuit or like basically losing it, the court lost more power and the country itself like lost the ability to find a way to remove the base until their contract ran out.
Right. I, so there's one other idea that kind of crossed my mind is that if Louisa is elected, um, and let's say there is a contract for the base for whether it be 1 year, 2 year, whatever, I think that if it it's shown that the base has reduced crime and narco traffic, if that data is proven, then I think even if she doesn't agree with the base being here, she takes the best of both and is like, okay, we'll keep the base, but we need to renegotiate the terms. You know what I'm saying? So that it's more beneficial for the country. Like, okay, you stop narco traffic, but we still have issues that we need to help with. We still got education and infrastructure things that we need help with. I think that would be a pretty decent bargaining tool. I don't know. The bad side is that Ecuador has the fewest bargaining chips in this deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do they really have to bargain with? The United States has no reason to negotiate with them anything except for drug trafficking. And
I mean, I
unless
like,
you get people to stop using drugs, then
there's something interesting about that. Once again, this whole this document, you're gonna have a field day reading through it because there's a lot of information. And according to an investigation, let me see if I can find it here. Well, basically, I can't find it specifically. I know it's in here, but the theory that the country itself is so involved in drugs, like it's not true. It's not real. Like the country itself is just like I guess you could say the middle ground. Like this is where the
yeah,
drugs go through, but it's not like the consumption of drugs is so high that that's like a pressing issue. So that was one of the things that was like argued here against like having the base. Basically, if the theory was to have the base to combat drugs, like really you don't need the base for that. You
exactly.
you really don't. Like it's not like the biggest deal. Like yes, for them to be smuggled through the country, maybe, but for that to be the main reason why the base is here, not so much.
I think that one thing I do know, like I said, from my years of working with in criminal justice, is that one of the best ways to stop corruption. And this is a deal that I would make. If I was Noboa or Louisa, and the United States was offering me some kind of deal, right? I would say, okay, look, I need to be able to fund our police and military, give them all a raise for at least the next 10 years. Like I need to be covered for the next 10 years. And like this country's small, I don't know. That would be like a few $1 billion. Honestly, a drop in the bucket in the United States government over a decade. Like nothing. The reason that these officers and military personnel, judges, whatever, are so corruptible is one, the gangs are giving them an option they can't really refuse. You take the money or take the bullet. Well, it's a two-sided, it's a two-front war. You got to, kind of suppress the gangs, get them out of here, give them less incentive for criminal activity. Two, give the police officers, military, whoever, more incentive to resist their bargaining. Now, like I said, someone who says, "Hey, look, I'm going to kill you," or you take the money, like there's not much negotiating there. But if it's a thing where someone is putting out feelers, like fishing, saying, "Hey, I gave you this much money for this, I gave you this much money for this," they're not saying, "Hey, look, I'm gonna kill you if you refuse." They're just saying, "Hey, like, I gave you this." Well, if the officers here are making twice as much as they currently are, they might be less inclined to take that. You know what I'm saying? And in the U.S., police and emergency personnel aren't the highest paid people around. A lot of times they do deserve more. There's a few bad apples that make everybody look bad, but a lot of them do deserve the money they get or a little more than that, and they're compensated to a point where it's not really worth them being corrupt. It's making a few extra $1,000 isn't worth years in prison as a former police officer. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the worst thing. Same with the U.S. military. Like they're compensated to a point where it doesn't really make sense to be corrupted. You kind of have to put people in that situation here in Ecuador where it's just monetarily dumb to try to seek out, corruption. And that's the deal I would make with the military. Like, hey, look, help me not have to rely on you. You know what I'm saying? Like, give me a head start. I'll let you have your base here. These are the rules in place, but we need some compensation so that our police force and our military can actually do their job without the temptation of corruption. That's just my idea.
The thing is here when it comes to corruption, at least from what everyone understands, it's actually the temptation to be corrupt is very high because it's kind of the contrary. Well, I don't know, maybe not so much, but here you're just so accustomed to living through, I guess you could say poverty, but I like to call it more like not poverty, but more like the bare minimum, that the opportunity to get even more and to get yourself out of that situation that maybe you or your family's been living through their whole lives is very high. And
Hmm.
normally, in other places in the world, you would be incentivized by, you study something good, you go and get a career that, pays a lot. But here, there's always that same conversation. Like you become a doctor because doctors, that's like the typical thing that you hear. Become a doctor, you get a lot of money because doctors get paid well, at least more than the minimum wage. Uh, but you become a doctor, and then because there's no jobs, you become a taxi driver, or you become something that has nothing to do with your profession. The best story in the best case scenario, it actually happened to a friend of mine. She studied something like chemical engineering, something related to that. She spent years trying to find a job. They even like she went to Quito because she's from here. She went to Quito, and over there they offered her a job that like paid $800, but it didn't give her a place to stay. It didn't give her like compensation for traveling, like moving from
Hmm.
her house to the job. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And it was like, what's the point? Like she had to change her whole life in order to do that. And yes, some people could say that's part of what you have to do when you're growing up. You have to make decisions, but she didn't see that as the best option. So she ended up going into content creation. She made videos about her art because she's an artist. She started making videos about her art. Now she has a successful little art school. Like
Hmm.
she has students who like, they pay to like learn how to draw and everything. She has these courses, and she recently had the chance to go on a trip because of everything that she's done. She was like, through all my effort, I finally was able to give myself a trip. Everything that I wouldn't have been able to do if I would have accepted that job, let's just say like 2 or 3 years ago, now I can do it with the job that I have that started off from something that I knew how to do, and it had nothing to do with my career.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they don't have that drive, they don't have maybe that creative talent, so they kind of just look at Congress. If you want the Asamblea, they earn thousands of dollars to sit on their butts. Like that's the complaint of every Ecuadorian citizen, unless they're somehow involved with that. Then of course they benefit from it, so they don't care. But for everyone else, it's like, what do we even have Congress for? Like, well, what is the Asamblea for? What are these politicians for that we have in the government if they're not approving laws that benefit the people and they're only approving things that line their own pockets? So
Hmm.
it's like, or they reject it because they have some kind of point of interest that makes it so that if they approve it, it goes against their party's wishes. So it's better to just deny it, even if it's beneficial for everyone. As long as it's not beneficial for their party, reject it.
Yeah, that sounds like the United States too. Um,
Right, right.
yeah, I think that there's opportunity here. There's opportunity here. Whoever's elected, and like I said, my skin in the game is much lower than the average Ecuadorian. So you're not going to find me cheering for one or the other or complaining on either end. I got to deal with it with whatever comes. As long as the people of the country are satisfied with it and they're happy, I'm cool with it. But I feel like there is opportunity here where the country is no country wants to be under the boot of another country. However, Ecuador, over the past few years, have been put in a position where they need the help of other countries to, if they want to get out of this situation quickly, you know. And I don't know, how exclusive this deal is with the U.S. military, or if they'll allow other militaries into the country. because there's no reason that unless there's an exclusive deal, there's no reason they couldn't have like you know China or Colombia or whoever to have some kind of military presence here. There's no reason that they can't do that. I think they need to take every benefit they can possibly get while they can. Not necessarily at the expense of Ecuadorians, though. Not like destroying the Amazon or some dumb shit like that. But there is an opportunity here. Like I said, I'm on the fence with the whole reasoning behind it or the deal, but at the same time, it could benefit the country. And I'm sure there's because here in Cuenca we see a lot of like political signs and people marching around with like Luisa signs or Noboa, and it seems like it's a pretty. I don't know. I know during the last election it was a pretty even split. I don't think that split has changed much. This thing may shift some people, like anything, but it may shift some people towards Noboa. And I'm afraid that this is just more of a political stunt than something that's really going to benefit Ecuadorians. That's my worry.
I mean, most of the time, my concern is that someone's trying to get benefit of something from somewhere. Obviously, in the case of Noboa, and a lot of people are having that conversation as well, with the situation how I don't know if you saw the picture that he went to go have dinner or something with Trump.
Mar-a-Lago, yeah,
Yeah. So people are trying to see it as like him trying to get into a better position with the states. And the reasoning behind it we'll never know because we're not in the mind of the president or what they're actually planning behind it in a positive point of view. Like if you look at it positively, like if we have a better deal with the states, maybe we can avoid the states putting some kind of heavy tariff like they've been doing with other
yeah,
countries. Like maybe we can, like, being on the good side of the states right now, well, being on the good side not of the states, of the president of the states,
yeah,
is a good thing for anyone right now because it avoids you a lot of headaches as we're seeing. Although I'm not going to get into the state stuff because I only know a little bit of the surface from what I've been hearing, but like what they're doing is actually putting themselves in a bit of a headache as well. I don't know if that's just part of the plan, but it does seem kind of complicated for them as well, all the things that they're doing. But like I said, if we can avoid things by being on their good side, then I'm guessing this is just another way to like tell them, hey, we want you here, we want you to help us, we believe in you, everything that you're doing is okay. So maybe there's some kind of long-term benefit that we're hoping. Maybe the states, like we said earlier, maybe they'll help us out with things other than military-wise. Maybe later on they'll help us with education, infrastructure. Of course, most immediate and concerning for the people, the safety of the country, because that's what we're mainly looking at with the military base. But maybe in the future it'll be other things that maybe we're just not looking at right now because we're really focused on the safety part because that's what's affecting people's lives right now. Because if the safety is harmed, well, you could say that if any axis is harmed in general, then everything else kind of becomes
yeah.
nothing. Like if safety is harmed, then the economy is harmed. If the
Hmm.
economy is bad, then of course safety becomes questionable as well. So it kind of one imposes on the other, one is related. So having them improve in some way, shape, or form is just beneficial for us. And we'll start with safety, which is what people are seeing the most. And yes, like you said, politically, for Noboa, by him doing that, it just makes him look good in the eyes of the people. Oh, hey, he's worried about our safety. This is the guy that we want.
Exactly. And, he could just be playing, some 4D chess. He might hate Trump in his guts. I don't know. Because like you said, it sometimes you gotta suck your pride up and deal with the devil, and maybe that's what he's doing, or maybe he really is, just wholeheartedly behind, the US administration, whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as it helps the country, I guess. But I guess we'll find out, here in the near future if that shifted the electorate towards him. And I'm pretty sure they'll do some polling and say people might say, "Oh, that's the thing that pushed me over to Noboa," or "I felt like he's the one who's trying to guarantee our safety." And one thing I wanted to mention is, do you have any feeling about the country maybe de-dollarizing if Luisa is elected?
Oh God, I have a big feeling about that, and try to
How
remind me
so?
of. There's also one more thing that I want to like mention, but separate. Remind me of that, which is related to what people think about, the whole deportation situation. We'll talk about that in a bit, but
Yeah, that's another kind of.
the dollarization, the de-dollarization on a personal level, really does traumatize me. There's no easier way to say that because I'm used to the dollar. I'm someone who grew up with the dollar. Like I never, ever, at least from when you can rationalize things, I never had interaction with the sucre, but my dad did, and he always mentions like what the sucre was, and the I guess you could say translation, what a sucre would translate to in dollars, and it's just like it's nothing. It's nothing. It reminds me of this reading comprehension text that I made my students do once of hyperinflation, which happened to Germany after I think it was World War II, and how their dollar, their currency, was worth more as firewood than it was as money. Like
Mm,
literally, they would burn the money, or like as soon as they got paid, they had to go buy something because the price of things would shoot up at that moment. And I can imagine if Ecuador were to de-dollarize, like how, first of all, how confusing it would be at the beginning. Like how everyone would have to like readjust everything. And you would really not know the actual price of anything until everything settled down.
exactly.
Because here, like, the whole haggling culture and everything, like, you don't even know if what they're actually giving you as a price today is just the price that they're trying to, like, sell you on because you might be able to drop it, but, like, if they drop it, like, what is that actually worth?
Yeah,
Because we have a value predetermined in our mind with the dollar. Not to mention everything that you hear about countries that already went through a situation of trying to use their own currency and it not going well for them. I don't know much about it. I just what the few things I've read is like not good for them. So
right.
I don't want us to go through the same thing. And the idea of what happened to Ecuador itself, like when people changed from sucre to dollar, I mean there was a crash because of that as well. And something that I don't want to happen if Ecuador goes from dollar to Ecuador. There was actually a funny joke because we do technically have some coins that are like Ecuador coins that work here in Ecuador. And people were arguing in favor of the Ecuador, like, oh, but look, what about these coins that are the Ecuador? And they're like, yeah, why don't you go take those coins and try to use them in the States and see if they don't send you to
Right.
eat Ecuador shit. So it's funny. We do technically have a coin, but it's like really realistically, where is that going to help you anywhere else?
Nowhere. Yeah,
Nowhere.
I think that if de-dollarization is the thing, I don't know that going back to either an old currency or creating a new one is the right idea for a country that's as small as Ecuador. Now, if it was a huge country of like, let's say Brazil, Brazil's like, hey, we're going away from, if Brazil was dollarized, and they're like, hey, we're going to go away and create our own. Brazil has a huge economy. They can kind of work that out. This country is really small, and where, like you said, where would the people use these dollars? Like Colombia is much bigger than Ecuador, so Colombia has their own currency. Colombians aren't so much worried about spending money and spending their money in Ecuador, but Ecuadorians would be more concerned about spending their money in Colombia. You know what I'm saying? So it's having the dollar is such a I don't even want to say easy but it is like it's the dollar. It's the world's most major used currency. And when it comes to banking, like banks definitely like prefer using the dollar. It does slow the growth rate of the country because it's tied to the US dollar, but it's also more stable. And stability is the one thing that you can bet on. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to speculate on instability. So I would say that like if the country was looking to go away from the dollar, like they should probably look at, hey, let's talk to the European Union, see if we can adopt the euro or something. Like not necessarily go back to their old currency or try to create a new one. Like go to one that's still used worldwide. You get what I'm saying?
For sure.
Because like you said, like what's the exchange rate if you go back? Do you tie your new currency to the US dollar? And now you're responsible for printing all this money, which which starts a whole new issue. So right now that money comes, those dollars are printed in the United States. It's controlled. It's like I said, slows growth, but at the same time it's steady and it's reliable. And when it comes to banking and investing, you can bet on a reliable currency as opposed to one that may go up or down, wildly. So yeah, I don't de-dollarization if it happened. Of course it would affect me. I have no idea how, honestly. I have no way to predict that, but that wouldn't be something that would necessarily make me want to leave the country unless my money was so devalued that it was just not worth being here. Um, I doubt it would be that bad, but still, I don't think they should go back to their old currency or create a new one. If you're going to go away from the dollar, go to something else that's used around the world like the euro or something. But I think stick with the dollar is the easiest thing to do.
It is really the easiest thing to do, and I'm actually surprised that's something that they wanna change. I don't know if it's because of the whole decentralization or the idea of digital currencies, and this is just me overthinking things, but I don't know if you've noticed how a lot of the things here, like in my 22 tips video, I always say one of my best tips there is the whole situation with like having physical currency, like having the $1 coin, the $5 bill, the $10 bill, which are like I guess the three most used, other than quarters and stuff like that. So it's like I don't know if like you've noticed how now everything is transfer. Like, if you want to pay someone something, transfer. If you want to pay a place, you can transfer it. Like, well, small businesses they accept transfers because in stores, you would have to use a debit card, something with the bank, but everything is through transfer. So I don't know if they're seeing that as like the future. Like maybe people aren't going to use physical money because at least from what a friend told me when they went to the States, they barely use, or well, not just the States. Another friend who went to Europe, there's a lot less use of physical
Yeah,
currency.
I hardly ever carry money in the United States. Hardly ever.
So it's like,
Yeah,
so it's like
you pay a
maybe
barber in cash or something like that, or at a craft show, you pay in cash. But even there, like LaShawn used to make lotions and soap and stuff at her craft show. Most of the purchases were through swipe. People in the United States really don't carry cash.
maybe now everything is gonna. Maybe that's what the theory that they have in changing the currency from the dollar to something more digital because the Ecuador, the way that they were presenting it, or the way that I was understanding it at first, was as a kind of digital currency. But I don't know. Maybe it's just this whole hype around crypto and like having something digital that we can use to not have to worry about changing the rate. Like, oh, it's worth this much here and that much over there. Maybe it's just something that has a value worldwide. I don't know. I really don't know what the idea behind it is, but I kind of feel like it's tied into the reason why they want to make something like that is because they're seeing less and less of a use of physical currency. Of course, there's still people who use it, but
Yeah, I think that like though um, you could still accomplish that and not de-dollarize. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like that's already happening in the United States. If let's say the reason that you want more control over the currency is so that you can get more tax dollars, just just make it so that just make it so that it's less convenient to use cash in the country. Now, of course, that would mess with the whole culture of like vendors and street vendors or you know at like ferias and mercados and whatnot. That would mess with their business, obviously. But I'm pretty sure the government realizes that they're not getting tax dollars from the vast majority of those people. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that might be, like you said, it might be the reason that they want to switch the currency to go to something where everyone has to do it digitally or it's mostly digital, where they have more control over the revenue and the income. I just think there's other ways if you want people to pay more in taxes or whatever. Um, there's other ways to do that. That's just me.
it's possible.
You can make you
You
can
always
make
have to look
access
at it.
to
Any kind of change that comes from the government always has to benefit the government. So there's got to be a reason why they would want to do it like that.
it's got and it's almost certainly monetary. It's that's the only thing that is you're talking about money. So any change they make has to put something in the pockets of the government some way. It's not going to cost them more because then they wouldn't do it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I don't know what the reason behind it is, but if it happens, it happens. I can't control that. But yeah, I think it would be a bad idea.
And then that's where I was. Then that's like what I said in my previous video. But hey, what do we know?
Right.
This is what we think. But like, who knows what's actually going through their minds? Maybe it was just polarizing topic, and they just wanted something that would grab headlines. They say, as they say, all publicity, even bad publicity, is good publicity.
Yeah, because it gets people talking and it gives them a feel of where the country is on that. And I have no idea like how Ecuadorians feel about de-dollarizing, but yeah, I can't see the reason for it, honestly.
No one I know wants that. No one I know
Okay.
wants that. I can
Yeah,
put it to you like that. No one I know wants that.
I even saw a YouTube ad. I've been seeing it for the last few days, and my Spanish is getting better, but it still isn't good. I got the gist of the ad though, and it was like basically like a vote for Luisa is a vote for like de-dollarizing or something like that. I was like, okay, they're putting up political ads about this, so there's definitely a portion of the country that does not want
I've been seeing more ads from Luisa, I'm guessing, going against Novoa, and there was actually a post on Facebook the other day that people are complaining, I guess could be the best word for it, that they're tired of seeing ads from Luisa basically calling Noboa a liar and stuff like that. Like, no, Noboa, no. The thing that she tried to promote during the political campaign, don't lie, Noboa. So it's like, I don't know.
it.
I'm not down for it. I'm not down for that.
Yeah,
Honestly, I'm not sure which side is better out of the two. They both got their advantages. If you want to look at the going back a little bit into the who's the better candidate, just the idea, because I don't know, I kind of feel like this conversation guides you to think that neither of them are good. I think they're both just gonna be like, how would you say this?
standard politicians.
No, no, like this is kind of like the government, where, like I said, it's the turning point in the sense that whichever one wins, it's gonna tell us something about what we already had notions of in the past. In the sense of Luisa winning, it just tells us if things happen the way that we think they're going to happen, less crime when she gets into power, Correa coming back to the country, then it's everything everyone thought about, and it just tells you you voted for what, like, you knew what was going to happen if you voted for this. So are you going to keep voting for this? I don't know. That's on you. And vice versa, if Noboa wins and does nothing, then it's like you don't vote for Noboa again, because now he had the 4 years to do what he had to do. And if Noboa does something, then you made the right choice. And then you can have the chance to vote for him again if you really like him, because technically this is where I'm kind of confused, because previously the year and a half was supposed to be one term, even if it was half the term, or not even half, but like that was supposed to be one term, and this was going to be a second term, so he couldn't be reelected for a third term. And even I think even he was saying that I'm not going to be like other governments trying to get reelected. I'm just gonna stay the time that I'm allowed to stay and be done with it. But now it's like he's saying that this is gonna be his official first term, from what I've heard. Like this is gonna be his official first term, so he could still be reelected another term, if that's the case. So I don't know. I kind of find that to be a little bit misleading from what was originally said, or maybe it was just a play on words. Like
Hmm.
when he said, I'm gonna stay the official time I'm allowed to stay. I'm allowed to stay. He knew that that wasn't official, and the official ones were over here, or he wanted people to interpret it the way that I'm actually interpreting it right now. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this was his first term and this was his second, and he was only going to stay the legal time. But realistically, he knew all along that that wasn't his first term. Before we cut off, because there was something that I told you I wanted to talk about a little bit
Hmm.
about the deportation situation, and not so much the deportation from the States, but I actually had to ask this because it was a curiosity of mine. Because I don't know if it's because I have sometimes a resentful take on things, but I kind of wonder what people were thinking about how the deportations were like affecting their thought process of people coming to live here. Because you've said a few times that like you don't have a stake here, and everything, but you live here. You're living here and everything, so it's like people's opinion of you might shift depending on what they see is happening in the States to fellow Ecuadorians. So I had that idea. I actually asked the day that I made the video for about dating in Ecuador. I actually asked the people who were there. I asked them, "What are your thoughts on the deportations? Like, do you feel some kind of way? Do you think it's fair and stuff like that?" Because even now, like we're talking about the military base, like having a military base here, but not having a Ecuadorian military base over there, or having the situation where Ecuadorians could be deported even if they're legally over there. Like, so I asked, like, what do you think about that? 95% of the answers, basically out of, let's just say 10 people, 9 people, like 90% in that case, they were like, it's not fair. And they actually were against the idea of letting people come live here and retire here if they're not allowed to go to the States and they're being deported from the States.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does this mean for the long term? Like, for the short term, it means nothing because this is just the opinion of a select group of people who don't feel good about the situation. But in the long term, if this keeps up and if deportations continue and if situations like that happen in the States, then maybe the Ecuadorian sentiment of having foreigners here, not just necessarily people from the States, but it's
Yeah.
going to be targeted more for that, but like foreigners in general, could change. Like if there's some places where, you know, they say that Vilcabamba has some situations that I can't confirm because I haven't been there, but if they say that there's some conflict with Americans being there, I could only imagine now what the thought process is seeing fellow countrymen being deported from the country while they're there legally. Like I could understand illegally. Like even I get that. Like I know that's understandable. But being there legally and being deported, like I assumed that the sentiment was going to change, and at least in the small case study that I had, 90% at least out of there were more than 10 people, but like at least if we assume out of 10 people, 9 of them don't agree with this, then like they don't like it, then we can only assume like if you were to take that number and multiply it for the country,
Yeah.
a large part of the country is not happy with what's happening and they don't find it fair. The argument for that, of course, the one person who did say that they were okay with it is because they understand that they're there illegally. They understand that the country has to do what it has to do to improve their situation. In doing that, they're doing things right, which is what one of the things that I always stand by. You always have to do things as right as possible because I know that unfortunately there's going to be cases where at least in a country like here there's always going to be a shortcut. Like I said, you have a contact, you have something, then you get things done faster. But while you're able to do things as right as possible, because that sets an example, which hopefully other people follow to do the right thing as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple of opinions, and I'll probably like lose track. But anyway, one, me and LaShawn, we do not agree with the way this administration is conducting these deportations. So let me just get that out there right away. Two, even though they keep talking about mass deportations, and that's the thing they're really harping on, the deportation numbers haven't really changed since Biden was in office. So they're not doing more deportations. Actually, they would have been better off just keeping the plan that Biden had in place, which was more ICE officials and judges to process the people who were coming in seeking asylum. What this administration is doing is just kind of kicking people out without even giving them the due process that they were entitled to under the program that Biden put in place. I think that like I would understand an Ecuadorian having an issue with me, you know, before this whole deportation thing came about. I get it. I get it. Like Americans feel that way, feel resentful for like foreigners that come to the United States and become, you know, doctors and engineers and whatnot. Like it's a natural thing. I think that like the whole with the way that it's being done is to me is just illegal. Like if people come in under a program, and like I said, this is legal. People come in legally, like seeking asylum or whatever the process. They should be allowed to stay until their case is heard and everything's done and everything's processed. You don't just arbitrarily kick them out and because they might have a tattoo, send them to El Salvador to a prison. You know, that's due process, that elimination of due process, like they can put whatever blanket statement over it says, you know, protecting the country, whatever, Illegal Aliens Act or whatever that crap is. Well, where does that stop? Because as a black guy, like I feel like, okay, like are we next? Are they going to come up with some law, some justification to say, okay, well, we designated these black gangs and these Hispanic gangs as terrorists. Well, now we have the ability to stop and frisk or stop and question or just stop and disappear someone who has a tattoo who we think might be associated with that. And you're asking some random ICE agent who doesn't know everybody's tattoo to make that decision. Like if you stop due process for one group, you can stop it for every group. So where does that stop? And that's why I'm totally against the way they're doing it. Yeah. Right now, you're using it as okay. We're getting rid of illegal aliens and people. They're here illegally and they're murderers. Whatever. Say whatever justification you want. You're lying. That doesn't mean that that can't balloon into something else if it benefits the administration and an election or something like that. And I don't want people that look like you or me to just be randomly picked up because of how we look. That's this thing. This is where it starts. And I know people are like, oh yeah, get rid of illegal immigrants. Okay, you're what are you really asking for? You're really asking for elimination of due process. And honestly, like for conservatives who are the main ones who like the government should be smaller, the government shouldn't infringe on people's rights. Like you're kind of rooting for it right now. You're rooting for people's rights to be infringed, and especially the people who are coming to the United States to work. Most of them aren't coming to the United States to be criminals. Even the people that enter the country illegally, the vast majority of them just want a better life, and that's all they want. They don't want no trouble. They're not here to commit no crimes. They just want to work, maybe raise a family, send some money back home, have a better life. I fully understand that. Like, what if the United States gets put in a position one day, and I don't know what will happen, but like now all of a sudden, Americans are illegally immigrating into Mexico and Canada. And then Mexico says, hey, all you illegal American immigrants, we made a deal with the president of Haiti, and we're going to send you all to this Haitian giant mega prison. Americans will be like, that doesn't make any. That's stupid. Like, what this is what exactly what you're cheering about right now. Um, so yeah, man, I can't get down with it. I understand wholeheartedly if Ecuadorian citizens have an issue with American citizens being here. I get it. I couldn't even be mad at them for having that opinion, and I wouldn't try to convince them otherwise. Honestly, that's just as a man, like that's something you got to deal with. It's this is a decision I made to live here. If people don't like me here, that's I got to live with that. They don't. You know, that's I mean that's just how I feel about
It is what it is.
it. Yeah, yeah, it is what it is.
That was just the idea that I had.
Now go ahead.
No, that was just quite the thing that I wanted to mention because it was something that I was curious what other people thought about it because like it just seems like something that you would think about eventually. Like it's especially like since on my channel I get the chance to talk to a lot of people who retire over here, who come live over here, who travel over here. Like what are people's thoughts about that happening? So I just wanted to ask it to those same people, and like I said, that was the result that I got.
Yeah.
But
Hey, if Luisa's elected and she wants us all kicked out, I'll find another country to go to. I like it here though. We plan to stay here. We want our residency. So, um, you know, we'll go with the flow. But like I said at the beginning, what the citizens of the country want matters more than what I want. So I just got to deal with it.
everything's good then. I got nothing else to say now. It's a weird
Well,
moment where Ace has nothing else to say since I'm always talking.
well, and here's the thing. Other thing, Ace, me and LaShawn might be singularly unique in our opinions. I'm sure there's a lot of expats that don't feel the way I do. I feel like hey, I should be able to live wherever I want, suck it up, eat it, whatever. I'll go where I'm welcome. That's the way we look at it. And as two African Americans, that's the way we kind of have to look at it because we're not really welcome everywhere. And you're kind of barely welcome in your own country. Yeah, I don't take this for granted. We love it here. So if they kick us out, they do. No hard feelings.
Well, we love having you here, so please don't go anywhere.
Thank you. Once again, man, I say I appreciate it. It's always enlightening getting to talk to you, and I'll make sure send me that link, and I'll put it in the description, and I'll make sure I have a link to your channel in the description. Anyone watching, if you appreciate this, hit the like button. Share it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back. Actually, I'll probably post this later on this afternoon, honestly. And we'll be back this week for our third anniversary live stream, our third year in Ecuador, which was like 2 days ago. So that'll be like, I don't know, maybe sometime this weekend. We'll see. I'll post it. But anyway, thanks again, Ace. And if you got any parting words for the guest, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And for anyone worried about the situation with the military base, like Steve said, I don't think it's anything we're gonna have to worry about right now. At least in terms of people coming to visit, people coming. It might actually bring good things, but definitely keep in mind that if you're coming here for good reasons, like for staying, traveling, and stuff like that, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah,
And just always make sure that when you come, you try Encebollado. I'm always gonna promote my Encebollado,
absolutely.
especially over here in Puerto Viejo. So
Absolutely.
please give it a shot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
All right, man. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon. Thanks for watching.
Take it easy.